Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 2 Episode 8. It's called Necessary Evil. So spoilers for the episode, as always, beware. In this one, Quark takes a job retrieving a hidden item on the station from a Bajoran, and he gets hurt in the process. He gets well, it's an attempted assassination, basically. But he is banged up. The more interesting part, though, is that this all ties back to a murder case that happened on the station back before Starfleet had control of the station, back when the Cardassians were in control. So we actually get probably more than half the episode is flashbacks to Odo's first ever time investigating a case and how he kind of started doing that.
With a very grey filter.
With a very grey, I have to say slightly blue filter.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
There was a colder kind of vibe to it. That said, though, I did think the first transition where he goes to open the door and it cuts to the door opening, but now it's in the blue filter and he's wearing like this more kind of neutral sort of duster kind of overall. I thought, oh, that was a neat transition into the backstory. And it was initially very exciting because I'm like, oh, we've talked so much about when the Cardassians were running this place. We've referenced it probably every other episode since the show started. It's actually kind of exciting to see how it was functioning when Ducat was there and, you know, giving out orders.
We've seen like little bits and pieces before.
We haven't seen much. I mean, maybe like a brief glimpse, but we've never spent time doing a plot.
Nothing like this level, no.
No, this felt very different and kind of fresh. And so Quark's there, Odo's already there running the bar, and we do eventually see Kira there as well, who factors heavily into this plot. She's kind of involved in the case. So that is the sort of just steps. We'll get into where it goes, of course, in a bit. Connor, what did you think of this episode?
It was pretty good, actually. Especially the more it went on. I thought like the first 10, 15 minutes of it maybe were a little bit on the slower side. I enjoyed I always enjoy Quark doing Quark things, right? Basically. But I felt like it was a lot of setup, but once it got to the meat of the investigation, I thought it was really quite solid.
Yeah, I quite liked it. And I even liked the first chunk as well, just because I think when it sort of became Quark and his brother, like going around on their own and trying to pull off this little mini heist. I mean, that's even a bit of a stretch to call it a heist, but just the running joke of Quark's brother knowing how to like break through a door and into a safe or behind a panel on a wall.
Everything because he's been stealing from Quark, essentially.
Well, to be fair...
not quite stealing, but accused of potentially having the ability to steal.
Quark immediately assumes he's been stealing, even though he quite clearly states multiple times that he's just, I need to get in the storeroom because you're not there yet, and I need to start serving customers, or I need to get into the Latinum to pay for a bill or something, whatever he said. And immediately Quark's like, I will never trust you again. You take your hands off anything forever.
I actually think this is incredibly relatable. There are many, many things in my workplace that I should not know or not be able to do. But also, sometimes there's like no managers around and you've got to get it done. So you find, it gets done somehow. What is all of that?
Oh, sure. I feel like even a lot of workplaces, the manager knows it's not supposed to be done by the staff, but will just tell them to do it anyway because it makes everything more efficient if, staff member can do whatever the thing a manager... Just because, it cogs up the chain if we have to wait for a manager to show up for... X thing to be opened or changed or whatever. So, yeah, no, there's definitely some... But obviously the funny part here, though, is that Quark's response to this is that, wait, what? He's not impressed by his skills as a lockpick. Again, it's more of a technical thing in this case because it's Star Trek, but that's effectively what he's doing. He's picking a lock. He's not impressed. He just immediately goes, wait, you've been getting into the storeroom without my say-so and without me being there? I don't trust you for a second. Which then led into one of my favourite running gags, maybe of the show so far, is that when Quark is like on his deathbed and Rom's very upset about it at first, as soon as it's pointed out that he'll inherit the bar, for the rest of the episode, Rom's reactions every time like Quark doesn't die is really funny to me.
It is pretty funny, yeah. Like, constant, okay, my house. Wait, no, I have to appear sad.
Yeah, because there's a moment where he says, I have to get back and run, I have to get back to my bar, and Odo's like, he's not dead yet. Or later on, when the assassin tries to kill Quark again because they've found out that he's alive in the med bay, he comes in and it's Rom who comes in, catches the assassin and kind of tackles him a little bit before Odo and Co show up, and he's like sort of wailing. He's like, "Oh!" And eventually Odo says, "Calm down, Rom. You're a hero. You've saved your brother's life." And he goes, "Oh, and he starts wailing again. I thought that was really funny. This was a really good running like comedy, like not even a subplot, but like just a sub joke throughout the episode. I don't know, I got a lot of kicks out of that. So I was enjoying the Ferengi shenanigans throughout the episode, even though that obviously isn't in the meat, but it was a fun kind of setup to what we then get, which is Odo's first rodeo, as it were. Which was interesting because it wasn't. It's like it's one thing to like flash back and say, okay, Kira was maybe involved in this murder, so it's of kind of interest, and it was one that he never solved. But you also add in the fact that, oh no, this was literally not only his first case, but he didn't even like set out to take a case. He wasn't an investigator. In fact, that's kind of what he says. Like the first flashback is Dukat saying, "Hey, shapeshifter, you've been doing some party tricks for us and blah blah blah, but I'm going to have you investigate this." And he's like, "I'm not a detective. Like, why would you have me do this?" And seeing like how he kind of gets roped into it this first time, what the motivations of that are, but also seeing how he's naturally good at a lot of the elements of it, and that's why he is good at it. I mean, even before we get to what the actual plot is, I think a couple of the really interesting things just from a character level of like really building Odo up some more is one, kind of the implications of like what his backstory is right before this, that he has been used as like a sort of entertainment puppet, but more so that he mentions that he was basically just trapped in a lab with Bajorans who were studying him, and he maybe not betrayed them, but escaped that because he just didn't want to be trapped in a lab anymore. Not because he was like trying to rebel against Bajor or anything, but just because that was freedoms. Yeah, it was just that was not a life he was happy with. So that's a really interesting sort of look at like what his life was before then. And then this other idea that he gets into later, which is that the one thing he kind of thinks that he's inherited from his own race is this sense of like justice that he's seeking. And
yeah, I thought that was interesting. Justice as a race memory. I'm like, either because obviously he could be wrong, right? He could just absolutely be wrong, and it could be just him, and this could be a red herring, and his species are not like this at all.
It's interesting because if it's wrong, then I think it's a good character beat still because it says a lot about him personally. And if he's right, then that's actually quite intriguing about like what the rest of his race are like.
And if it is right, I want to see how they warp their perception of justice, because there's no way it's the same way as what we think here, like on the station. Like, justice is a clearly defined process.
Yeah, I wonder if they're like, yes, we are thoroughly about justice for our own kind, but as soon as there's any other aliens involved, I don't know, there's no justice involved. It's our way or the highway. Like, I suspect it's got a warped thing where Odo, his entire thing in this backstory, and there's something that Kira keeps saying to him, young Kira keeps saying to him, is like, you're going to have to pick a side. Like, what's right and wrong here? Who are the bad guys here? You're kind of having to try and maybe judge that. And Odo's kind of struggling with this idea that justice is completely neutral and it doesn't have to pick a side, but ultimately he kind of does have to make some key decisions here or there to be like, to step in, because Dukat just wants a scapegoat. He just wants someone to like hang, to say, hey, it's solved, we're done, let's move on with this. So there's kind of like a noble like motivation for Odo as well to actually take the case, because he's basically told, we'll just pick like 10 random Bajorans and kill them to scare everyone out of doing this again if you don't do something.
And it probably would have worked.
Yeah.
As much as finding the quote unquote real culprit would have done.
Yeah. So I think the just building more intrigue into like Odo as a character and his species, and just kind of like seeing his first investigation, seeing him kind of like settle into that role, and maybe even like him realizing that like he wants to find justice because he realizes that if it's left to the Cardassians, there won't be any. Like, it won't be justice that happens. It'll be, it'll be a scapegoat. It'll just be a witch hunt for someone who's not guilty, that kind of thing. But more specifically from his sense of wanting to intervene with that, not to be a hero per se, but just because he's appalled at the idea. There's a big scene where he's questioning Kira, and Dukat comes in and says, is this her? Like, he's ready. He's got the noose ready. He's like got it in his hand almost. And he's like, yeah, is this her? I'm ready to go. And Odo turns around and defiantly says, no, it isn't her. And he says he's convinced, and I do think he's somewhat convinced by this point, because she's said a bunch of stuff that, even though she's been lying about some stuff, it's probably true to an extent, even though we find out at the end of the episode that she actually did kill the guy. But that's, that's another thing. He makes a choice to still just say it definitively to Ducat in the moment, because I think on some level he would rather, even if he's not 100% yet, not sentence her to her death right now by saying he's not sure, because that's what will happen if he says he's not sure.
Yeah. I think also he is kind of convinced, because there's a bit in the present where he's talking to Kira, and he says, oh, you were a better liar than I gave you credit for. So I think he definitely believed to a good amount.
Yeah, I think he was leaning towards it. I don't think he was like 100% locked in yet, though, but he was kind of forced to sort of say that he was, just to not have like someone killed for no reason. I think that stuff is super interesting. It's a really fun part of the episode, and really helps build everything up. It's fun seeing the station at this time where there's like caged, like sort of barriers up in places. People aren't allowed to just go and come as they please. It feels a lot more oppressive. So, seeing all this kind of actually exist is kind of interesting. It's kind of cool, especially when it, the whole motivation of this is this woman that hired Quark to get this item, which turns out to be a list of Bajoran names. It's a list of collaborators who are all spies and rats for the Cardassians. She's effectively blackmailing them for lots and lots of money, because she's hit hard times. Because, hey, if the Bajorans ever find out you were helping the Cardassians, they're probably all going to be tried for war crimes, if nothing else. At the very least, their reputation amongst everyone around them is going to be obliterated.
Oh, yeah. Bad.
So, yeah, that's her whole motivation. So this idea that her husband was a collaborator, at least assumed so anyway, but the actual story she tells early on in the flashbacks when Odo goes to question her and notices that she's not been crying and finds that suspicious, she says, oh, he's having an affair with a young woman who just arrived on the station. And it's actually Kira who turns out to be this young woman. And I was actually thinking, as soon as we saw her and she's got the longer hair, I was like, you're in the Resistance. What are you doing in the station right now? And by the end of the story, that actually is addressed.
She's answered, yeah.
Yeah, she's here on behalf of the Resistance to sabotage stuff. And, well, that's what she says in the flashback. We find out in the present day story that she was actually there to find this list. Like, she was there to find out who the collaborators were. And she got caught stealing the list, and she wasn't here to murder him. That wasn't her goal, wasn't her mission. But because she was caught stealing the list, she did have to sort of defend herself and sort of wipe the trace of it happening. But it turns out, and it's actually the big sort of dramatic point in the episode ends on, is the Odo realizing that it wasn't the wife that killed the husband. That's kind of what he was suspecting all these years, that the wife was like, maybe killed him because he was having an affair or wanted to have an affair or some other reason that he's not deduced yet. But that was kind of what he was assuming, or at least it feels like that's what it's leading the audience to believe is the assumption anyway throughout the episode. So when he says that, oh, I don't think you killed your husband, and then we get the episode ends on a one-on-one scene with Kira where he sort of like reveals, yeah, like it wasn't her. He was a collaborator. Who would kill a collaborator working for the Cardassians? Probably the rebels that are fighting against the Cardassians. And Kira at this point fesses up and sort of explains what happened. I think it's a cool scene because it kind of ends in this really dour note where she says that she never admitted it to him after, because after the occupation was over, the Federation took control of the station and things were settling into a new status quo. Obviously, she wouldn't get into trouble now for what had happened back then. It was sort of wartime and whatever else. But she never told Odo because she says that she actually cares about what he thinks of her, and she's never been able to work up the courage to tell him. And he kind of implies that maybe it won't change how he thinks of her. But then when she asks, "But will you ever trust me like you did before?" he can't answer, and we end in this really kind of dour note where the relationship is maybe, fractured for the time being right now.
Yeah, I think it is definitely a case of for the time being.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think it's a permanent status quo, but I can see this lasting at least till the end of the season.
Yeah, and as this show, unlike other Treks, I'm actually assuming that this is going to, if not be directly referenced, I think there will be a moment where we sort of say, oh, like the camaraderie's been repaired in some form. There'll be like a moment or an episode where it feels like they've rekindled some element of trust. I think one of my favorite things about the episode actually is as soon as we find out Kira's involved in this, when we see her in the flashback and it comes back to present day, when she comes up and says, hey, yeah, I've been thinking if it had to do with the guy that used to run the shop there, the chemist shop. And he's like, yeah, I've been thinking that too. The vibe and the tone of that conversation, where it feels like she wants to help because she was involved back then, but there is this lingering feeling of like, but did she have more to do with it? Is there like a secret here? And she's trying to be helpful in a genuine way, but maybe still concealing something. I think it was a really nuanced like tone I was getting from her, right? It wasn't, because I think there's a lot of like really typical like character presentations in a story like this, where either they're super helpful or they're too helpful, and that makes you think, oh, they're hiding something, or they're kind of shifty and like clearly don't want to talk about it, so they're clearly hiding something. I thought this actually, maybe I'm praising the writing here, but I think I'm especially praising the performance of the actress, is that she seemed to ride this line of genuinely concerned and wanting to help and wanting to know what this is about, but not in a way that it was just to protect herself because of whatever was going to be revealed. It never felt like she was trying to cover her own ass,
Yeah, I think that's partially acting, writing, and the direction as well probably comes into that. I think it's this nice line of being helpful, but she also wants to, I assume, like keep an eye on just how far he gets in the investigation. She'll be helpful to a point, obviously, but she's not going to give him the answers. But if he's going to find them, she wants to know and like be aware that it's going to point to her.
Yeah, I never got the sense that she would ever impede it, though. Like, she would never like try and stop him. But if he gets to them, it's fess up time.
It's more so she's aware if she needs to like prepare herself for that moment, as opposed to so she can stop him.
Yeah, so you never find yourself like disliking her character or anything because of it. Like, she always feels like she's acting as noble as she possibly can in the situation, I guess, is what I'm saying. At the end of the episode, I don't think the audience thinks less of her in the same way that Odo probably doesn't think less of her per se, because he understands the context of she was in a resistance during an occupation. It was effectively wartime. Like, there was context for what was going on.
Yeah, we might not have known, and he might not have known all the things that she did, but there's some implications, right? If you're in a resistance against that specific occupation, like, he knows what the Cardassians were like. He knows the sort of things the resistance were involved in on a broad scale. So while he might not know the minutiae of what she did personally, I don't think it's also not that surprising.
Yeah, because there's some twists and turns during the flashback story. We get like Odo's first ever interaction with Quark, where he's questioning her alibi, which she did need she needed it, and then when she finds out that he knows, it's because she was sabotaging a transponder thing, which turns out to be true, and that seems to be why she needed the alibi. But it turns out, no, she was actually trying to find that list and was involved in the murder. So the reason why she has the alibi is kind of neither here nor there. But Odo goes to question Quark and ask, like, was she here? And Quark basically says he had sex with her. Says, oh, she was applying for a job and she was showing what her talents were. All very, full of implications. And Odo just no-sells it. And he's like, are you making a sexual reference right now? And sort of grills, pulls Quark in, grills him. It's the start of a beautiful frenemy relationship, I suppose, if you will. But I think seeing these first interactions are interesting. I think maybe the most interesting part of this scene is just seeing Quark run the bar, under Cardassian occupation, and just how much he's not changed a bit. Like, he was flourishing just the same. It doesn't matter to him who the clientele is.
Yeah, he was a scumbag cheat all the time, just as much as he could get away with, but still a coward. Yeah, and even when it's like, oh, you give an alibi to someone, he just says, oh, I'll be fine, I'll just give a crate of like this Cardassian whiskey to the cat, and it'll be all, he's just corruption. Okay, we're just deep in the heart of corruption here, that's all. And the cat just walks out and says 2 cases probably, as if, yeah, I'll accept that, but I want a bigger load this time. Yeah. There's always a price.
Yeah, it's interesting, like, fleshing this stuff out and seeing like the different character interactions of the time. Obviously, it's interesting seeing Odo do this kind of work for the first time and kind of almost discover his purpose and what makes him feel like he's actually doing something he's supposed to. We should probably explain, actually, that part of the reason why we even hear his opinion on this is because he actually narrates the episode via a log for the first time. In fact, the start of the episode, when he starts, it's just before Quark and Rom go to steal the thing, he gives his first ever log, and he basically explains that the Federation want this, that because he's the security chief on a Federation station, this is something they expect of him. And he kind of like, clearly isn't in love with the idea, but he'll fulfill his duty and he'll do it. So there's a very interesting tone to the way he speaks in his log.
There is. I think it's a little bit different, because obviously we're used to having log entries on Star Trek at this point. Like just interspersed throughout the episode is these, the narration. I think especially the stuff in the flashbacks with the visual style and him giving that delivery and being the investigation, it felt very noir. Oh,
for sure, yeah, definitely very noir. But for me, it was got really interesting when he started talking about how he feels about the case, because it was like, oh, this like it's not that other captains or whoever's doing the log entries in the past have never given some personal input, because they'll say how they feel about something in a broad sense, but it felt like Odo, because at one point he even says something. He says, I don't know if that's the sort of thing that goes into this log, but I don't care. He kind of just, he fills it in a very different way. And I think, if they come back to this every once in a while, where we get his take on how you do the log, is interesting. I could see some more noir-esque episodes coming out of it as he's investigating stuff.
Oh yeah, because obviously, like, the log serves a very specific purpose. Obviously, in universe, it's record the facts, but for the purpose of the show, it's recap, sum up, if
exposition
when there's but especially with ad breaks, like, hey, if someone just joins you after an ad break, here's where you're up to in the episode, here's the bare minimum you need to know to watch the rest. It has a very specific purpose, so they don't usually get that involved with feelings. So I think using it here as in a creative way is kind of cool.
I mean, it kind of sums up the show as a whole, really, right? Like, at least, the better episodes so far, and like the hints of where this show is going and what it's going to become, is taking the ideas that have been in Star Trek and doing something different with them, and using them to build up more complex characters. I mean, the idea here that we are villain, because it's not like the villain herself, like the woman who like hired Quark and then tried to assassinate him with a henchman. It's not like she is inherently that interested in a character in and of herself, but the idea that she's blackmailing people who were enemies against their own people during the occupation is inherently just a lot darker and more interesting than a lot of the throwaway, like, context background plots that you get in some other Star Trek shows, right? Which is not to, everything I'm saying here is not to knock Next Gen or the original series. They're fantastic at what they did, but Deep Space Nine is clearly exploring something different. It's leaning a bit darker. It's leaning into a little bit more of a cerebral look at more raw characters, and actually having someone like Ducat around on a consistent basis to kind of, just sort of hearing kind of how he's amused that they used Odo as like a prop for like a magic trick or whatever he was talking about. Odo uses his powers. They keep calling it the Cardassian neck thing. And I wasn't really sure what they were talking about, to be honest. Maybe we'll see it one day, but but they keep referencing that he kept doing this thing at a party for the Cardassians, and clearly Odo doesn't want to just be a party trick, and he's given this purpose. And I kind of like as well that his purpose comes from a place where, Ducat clearly, as Odo defines it by the end of the episode, Ducat picked him for this because he had to keep his distance from his informants because he didn't want to like give away the fact that they're informants. So he's got this third party stepping in. But the idea that it kind of inadvertently creates the Odo we know, because Odo actually finds like he actually does have a sense of justice and he wants to do this job well, regardless of the motivations of who gave it to him in the first place, being kind of seedy and, Ducat had ulterior motives. Of course he did. Like, we knew that the second Odo walked into the room.
That's Ducat, yeah.
So
Odo probably knew that.
I'm sure he did. So he's trying to navigate that and like do the right thing. And hell, that's even what the cat exploits to make him agree to do it, is, hey, we'll do this wrong thing if you don't do it and make us do it properly. So that's even like what he appeals to get him to give into it. So yeah, it's all very interesting. Also, a little bit when he first goes over to talk to Kira in the flashbacks, and his opening lines like, "Oh, doesn't seem right for an attractive woman to be sitting by herself." Now we know Odo, so we know it's not he's not hitting on her. This is just him pointing out the context, and it's suspicious because she's alone. But she's like, oh, I'm not into what you're trying to do right now. And he has to sort of back his way out of it. But then we find out later that she got fired from a job. I mean, admittedly, she tells that story. We don't really know if she's telling the truth about her backstory at that point. But so she says she assaulted a superior for trying to make a move later in the episode.
I think it's a very believable story, though. Even
for sure.
Even still, like,
I certainly believe that Kira would beat the shit out of someone for trying it. Like, that does not sound far-fetched to me at all.
Whether or not it happened, it almost doesn't matter, because you can believe it happened.
You could almost argue that she's very wisely appealing to something that's referencing something they already talked about in a weird way that makes it sound more like Odo almost stumbled into something and she kind of uses that and exploits it in a way so that when she brings this thing up later, it's something that he can go, oh yeah, that's something that was clearly on your mind. You've clearly, like, the reason why you jumped to that assumption is because you've had some bad experiences before. Like, she's almost like playing 4D chess with him in a way there, perhaps. I could be reading too much into it. I don't know, but
it's weird because obviously with the specific timing of who she is at that point, you can't rule it out. You can't rule out that she is playing those games.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe she's not. Maybe it is just, on how it seems on surface level.
Yeah, because I guess the question is like when he was like noticing she was lying, like did she know? Like, not know, but like clearly, obviously, there's the main lies that she was able to conceal, but by telling him a bunch of true things. But like, did she expect him to see through like the surface level lies and have to go deeper? I assume that was kind of what happened there. Is that she tries to tell this lie about where she was, what she was doing. It gets found out, and he says, "No, I can tell you're lying." So she sort of says, "Okay, I'll have to give him some truth." And she says, "Hey, there was this transponder. I sabotaged this thing, whatever." But is able to conceal the real thing. But at a certain point, is she like, or was she prepped for that? Did she have like, okay, this is my backup lie in case the first one fails? Like how much of that was her being lucky? Or how much of that was her actually sort of like being prepared for someone like Odo? I don't know, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's no way to know for sure. I'm inclined to say probably prepared, not necessarily for Odo, but for like in case she got captured or questioned by a Cardassian.
Yeah, she definitely, like, even though I kind of agree with her, and I think she's right in what she says, but I do think she's intentionally playing on his morality when she keeps bringing up, oh, hey, they will just hang me even if there's no real evidence. The fact that you've not just turned me in already is the only reason why I'm alive. And I think that's the other little interesting nugget that kind of adds some layers to their friendship in the future, is that as soon as this stuff gets brought up, and like Odo kind of reiterates that, oh, like, of course I didn't let you get hanged for that because you were innocent of the crime. Like, she straight up says, like, I'm alive today because you did not turn me in for that thing. So for it to turn out at the end that she did do the thing, and he technically still, like, it worked out for the best that he didn't turn her in for various reasons.
What interests me is even if he'd known that she was, not innocent, she was guilty of this crime, does he still think that she deserved to be hanged for it, or does he think it would have been harsh?
I guess that's where the justice not being so blind thing comes into it. It's not quite as black and white as that. I wonder, I wonder if we get maybe a story with Odo where he's kind of forced into a very morally difficult choice, where he has to make a decision that can't be simple and has to have shades of grey, and arguably maybe he's already had a couple of like sort of stories that have dipped into that. But I could see there have been like big Odo moments with that, and knowing that his race is going to be around at some point. This is just a minor spoiler we kind of both were aware of from early on. I suspect a lot of like him defining what he believes in and what is right and what is wrong is going to be a big part of like his character in the future. Yeah. So I think this episode is setting up a lot of really intriguing things that I'm excited to come back to and see where they go with his character. So a lot of flashbacks. It's starting the investigation, meeting Kira for the first time, questioning her, meeting Quark for the first time, all that stuff, and then the investigation in present day is fine. It kind of just follows beats very quickly because it's mostly the flashbacks, but you know, it's like I say, all the chemistry between him and Kira and the present day stuff is very nuanced, and I think it feels really nice by the end when it ends in that really dour note of like, oh, maybe this friendship's been a little broken now because of this. So, yeah, cool. Excited to see where we go. So, no, this was a solid episode. This was having not watched the Deep Space Nine in like 7 or 8 months. This was a very like nice one to come back, especially since that first Next Gen we watched was kind of a bit of a dud. It was a mediocre episode. It was
definitely more mixed, yeah.
Yeah, this one, it was like, oh no, I'm actually really excited about watching this show again, because this is reminding me of just like the just a bit more depth and everything it seems to be doing with the characters, because it feels like everything's progressing forward.
Imagine how disappointed it would have been if we'd come back on one of the rare bad episodes.
I know. I mean,
there are some.
Yeah, there are some, but it wouldn't have dissuaded me. I didn't know it. I know enough to know that it would just be a.
I know,
blip,
but it would have been really annoying.
Yeah, but no, very very good episode. Excited for more Deep Space Nine. So that won't be the next Trek review. We'll be back to TNG. They're just kind of alternating for a little bit. We are following the original release dates for the record, but when we do come back to Deep Space Nine. The next episode is called Second Sight, and here's the description on IMDb. While noted scientist Gideon Saitic, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that, but that's fine, is preparing for an ambitious project, reigniting a star, Sisko is intrigued by a woman who keeps disappearing. Okay. We'll see.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
I can see the IMDb rating, so I'm not that optimistic, but so we'll
Thanks for that.
Look, expectations are
lower now, yeah.
Keep in check.
Yeah.
You know, you have to go on. Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe we'll think the internet's too harsh.
Hey, it's happened before.
It definitely has. We've had a couple where we've really went on a different opinion to the rest of the web. But hey. But yeah, let us know what you thought of this episode of Deep Space Nine, NZ comments and all that stuff. Like, subscribe, and of course you can support all the content and all the reviews both here and over on the movie channel and get bonus stuff by supporting us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the shows coming. But thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there, Odo was so focused in this episode. Like, usually I do the Odo thing at the end of this because he was barely there, and it's like, oh, this is how Odo could factor into it. But Odo is like the primary factor in this entire thing.
Didn't really do much shapeshifting though.
No shapeshifting. Okay. Odo found a list. He checked it twice. He found out it was not air nice.